she's sort of saying, you know, we're going to make a decision sooner rather than later. There's a lot of calls that they've got to lance the boil on this. And there are critics out there today, James Campbell in the News Corp papers, saying she'll be lucky to last until Christmas. I don't know who'd want the job right now, Andrew. What do you think?
No, I don't think she'll be rolled by Christmas. One of the reasons is because she will dump net zero by 2050, which 20 of the people who voted for her, most of her supporters opposed, by the way, dumping that, but she's got no choice. Otherwise, the coalition splits and then she will lose the leadership. Angus Taylor will come in and say, look, I can repair the coalition. So I don't think she'll be rolled by Christmas, but, you know, by mid-next year, you'd almost put money on it, unfortunately for her, Susan Lee. I mean, she hasn't performed that well. I think delaying a decision on this net zero thing has really worked against her, and she should have learnt from Peter Dutton on The Voice. He delayed a decision on that, and that allowed the Nationals to front run. And that makes you look weak, doesn't it? Because it makes it look like the smaller party is running the show. Now, she said, oh, no, we want to take our time, we want to process. David Littleproud's thinking about himself. The Nats are thinking about themselves. So they just said, oh, well, bugger it. We'll come out and this is our position. And then she looks weak. So that was a really critical error. And going forward, the Liberal Party needs to start thinking, we need to be ahead of this. We need to stop David Littleproud doing this to us because it's happened twice now.
Yeah, I don't know that, you know, he is playing a hard strategic game here. I mean, they've had 8 months to turn this around and put a decision out there. We have been talking about climate for 20 years. This net zero policy has been with the Liberal Party now since 2021, so 4 years for them to have internal research, for them to have a view. It was a huge issue we knew coming out of the initial break in the coalition because nuclear was in and then nuclear was out. So, you know, I say this again, I've been in opposition. You've only got one job, and that's to get out of opposition. She's not running a portfolio. She's not doing all the other things that governments normally do. This idea that you've got the luxury of years to review all your policies, well, you don't. And this one should have been absolutely at the front of the queue. I completely agree with you, Andrew.
Well, you don't because of the Nationals. So if you were, say, a Labor opposition, then you get a time of your choosing. But the Nationals changes the game here because they're not playing team, in my opinion. They're playing for themselves. And they say, well, we didn't lose any seats. You lost all the seats. But, you know, Littleproud's got to worry about his own splits, Barnaby Joyce leaving and all this sort of thing. But the fact they're not playing as a team, you know, there's been national leaders past who would have said to Susan Lee, righto, let's get together, let's work this out, let's put it through shadow cabinet. It's kind of what happened with Morrison and the net zero policy and Barnaby to some extent, even though the Nats have to have a party room after that. But you've got to be the leader of the coalition.
Yes, but I think the Nats have also got an eye to the bleed of the votes across to One Nation because they aren't just Liberal Conservatives leading. These are National Party people, and we know exactly the pockets they are, particularly out of Queensland, Northern New South Wales. So he is doing the right thing, I think, by his party. I mean, we often talk about the coalition, but they are two separate parties. And on issues like the single desk, and I was there at the time, they split on that issue, but they held the coalition together. I just don't think on energy being as absolutely ubiquitous as it is to the economy, I just don't think that's a plausible option. But she had plenty of warning, mate. She was the deputy leader. She's not come in from nowhere to the leadership. She was there by Peter Dutton's side for the whole 3 years of the last term. If she did not know this was a burning issue, then she's just not up to the job.
Well, you can't sustain the news poll numbers she's got either. Now, the supporters of her would say, well, people are always quitting the front bench or having a crack at her, and that's true. But at the end of the day, she's made a number of missteps, I believe, and it just isn't looking decisive enough and she's not on the front foot enough. I mean, I look forward to interviewing her soon because I think those sorts of things you need to do as opposition leader. You need to be on the front foot. You need to want the interview to come to you. You need to, you know, it's like, I hate to use a cricket analogy, but I will. You're in slips. You want the ball to come to you. You want the catch. And, you know, you don't want a situation where, oh, well, you know, we'll do that next week or we'll do it the week after or we'll do it the month after. Or, you know, I'll get round to those interviews, but not now. I'll get round to that press conference, but not now. The hungriest politicians, and Dutton had this problem too, by the way. He wasn't that keen on, you know, he wouldn't speak to the press club. OK, you hate the press gallery. Who cares? It's the job. And that is what these characters need to realise, Peter, if they want to succeed and they want to be Prime Minister. It has to occupy every, minute of your day. I mean, look at Tony Abbott, look at John Howard, look at Anthony Albanese, frankly. They're all workaholics and they all basically know that the job of opposition is media and you've got to be doing that and doing it hard. And then you've got to come up with solid positions, not sort of wishy-washy, which way are we going on this? Who am I going to offend? How do I, not split the coalition? Mate. You come to the position. You come to the position. Yep, sorry, but you come to the position and then you convince Littleproud this is our position. The art of persuasion's part of it too. But you don't come to a position, you're on a leadership phone call on Sunday like Susan Lee was, waiting to hear what everyone else said before making up your mind, not giving a view on that phone call, mind you, while she had Anne Ruston, who's got 20 MPs behind her saying dropping net zero is crazy, and, 3 right-wingers saying, well, we need to drop it or we're stuffed. But you don't proffer an opinion in that phone call, 2 hours. You just sort of, weigh things up, I'm not sure. It's a recipe for disaster. You've got to have firm views and you've got to have conviction and you've got to work your backside off.
I'll just say this to my viewers, Jesus, delay is annoying between us. I love it, we're in the same studio. Part of the problem for her and the lack of media is that she hasn't got a message to sell. She's still waiting for that to land down on a tablet from heaven. She wants someone to tell her. And your point there about that call with the leadership, she's waiting for someone to tell her what the answer is. Well, the problem when you're the opposition leader, just like when you're a minister with a tough issue on your desk, sometimes there's actually not a right answer. Sometimes there's multiple right answers, and you've got to take a political judgment and pick a path and stick to it with conviction and argue it. I think that's part of the deficiency she has in her political character. Let's go to that interview you had with someone who has plenty of character deficiencies, Matt Keane, former New South Wales Liberal, now the chief spruiker-in-chief of Labor's Renewable rollout. You had him on the program. You pushed him twice on the whole issue of how much taxpayer support renewables get. Have a listen.
Senator Ross Cadell was on this program yesterday, Matt Keane, and he said there isn't a renewables project in Australia which doesn't have some level of taxpayer subsidy. Is that correct?
Well, what is correct is that Ross Cadell and the National Party were advocating for multiple billion-dollar taxpayer subsidies for nuclear energy. So it's just hypocritical that he cherry-picked something like that.
What percentage of these renewable energy projects are taxpayer funded then? Is it 10%, 20%? Do you know?
Andrew, what we do know is that we need to get on with delivering these firmed renewable projects.
What a fudge, Andrew Clennell. There is not a project in Australia that does not get some form of taxpayer support. That's the answer. Why can't he be straight and own up to it and then sell his harebrained scheme?
Why did they privatise power generation? Because after they did, there was no investment in coal-fired power stations. And I take Queensland out of that, maybe WA, because it's still a public system. And you see the Queensland government moving to keep coal open for longer. But everywhere else, it seems to me there is the taxpayer subsidy. Now, it's not the entire amount, and it's great to have some private sector money in there, but it just increases in amount. And, the New South Wales government's propping up Eraring as well. It just hasn't worked, has it? This whole energy thing isn't working, hasn't worked. The difficulty for the opposition, though, and I know opposing can get you an electoral win and all that, is at some point or other they'll have to say what their answer is. And OK, nuclear, where's the investment going to come from? Is it too expensive? They have to be able to convince the Australian public they actually have an answer, because it seems from the election result, the Australian public at the moment is prepared to put up with the power bills for a little while. They won't forever.
Well, they had no option though, Andrew. There was no option at the last election that had a course other than net zero in it from the two major parties. That's the issue. And I want to back the coalition. If they went their own way, at least there's a contest. At least there's an opportunity for the punter who is drowning in these bills, businesses that are going to the wall, have an option that is not net zero. And I think that's the fight we've got to see play out in the next few weeks. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for your time.